So, as it says in the title, I'm going to be talking about it's called the bomb cyclone, and it's a type of the reason I'm talking about it today is because that is what recently affected the East Coast, particularly the Southeast, North Carolina, South Carolina. Um, I think it also kind of affected parts of like Virginia, um, and Ohio. I think uh, it was largely the East Coast, um, and it one. I saw a lot of stuff on social media about people thinking that it was like made up, because like weather people, they can't see the future, and so they will give predictions, but then the storm will have different ideas and it'll veer a different direction, or it'll like de-intensify. And so I saw a lot of people thinking that it was just like a conspiracy theory to make people go to the stores. And then shortly after, the East Coast got impacted by this massive bomb cyclone, and it caused it one triggered snowstorms that were pretty record breaking throughout. And this is the cold itself affected the entire eastern seaboard. Florida, while it didn't get affected by the bomb cyclone, it did have record low temperatures. I think it was the coldest temperatures it had had since like the 1930s, I believe. And this is my favorite fact. I find it so fascinating. And also, I'm glad I don't live there because that would be kind of horrifying to watch. They're okay, but basically iguanas, if you don't know, they're cold-blooded animals need the environment to help them warm up or cool down, which is why you like see them sitting in the sun. During this cold freeze, the iguanas basically become temporarily paralyzed because they're so cold, and they just like fall out of the tree. So it was literally like raining iguanas in Florida for a little bit of time. I think I saw one article that was talking about at least 40 to 50 calls came in within just a few hours of all of the iguanas that were affected by these cold temperatures. It was cold enough that Tampa even got like snow, not thick snow, but little bits of snow coming down. A lot of those areas also got black ice. Black ice is called that because it is hard to see. The ground itself like freezes. And that's the number one reason for car crashes during cold temperatures, because you basically just like slide across, your tires don't have any traction. So yeah, lower areas, Florida had extremely cold temperatures. Most of it was below freezing. But upper areas, North Carolina was particularly hard hit, was exposed to a bomb cyclone, which I will get into now. By the way, if I sound funny, I'm getting over cold, so that's why I might sound out of breath or like funky. Okay. So, first wanted to define a bomb cyclone because unlike hurricanes, tornadoes, most people don't know what bomb cyclones are. Bomb cyclones, or as meteorologists call it, explosive cyclogenesis. Cyclo meaning circular, genesis meaning production. So you're producing a circular storm, basically. It's a very powerful storm that rapidly intensifies when the atmospheric pressure drops at least 24 millibars. Millibars refer to, you can get like pressure gauges, which kind of look like thermometers. But instead of being affected by temperature, it's the actual air pressure, and it'll push down on the liquid inside. I think it's also mercury, but I'm not entirely sure. But it has to drop a certain period of time, or a certain amount in a certain period of time within 24 hours to be considered a bomb cyclone. Otherwise, it would just be a rapidly intensifying storm. The same thing qualifies for hurricanes. It's rare, sort of. It's been rare historically, but it's becoming a little bit more common now, where hurricanes can also rapidly intensify. There was a famous example in 2024, I believe. I think it was Hurricane Otis. It was off the western coast of Mexico, and it hit Acapulco, I believe, directly. And that one was famous because it rapidly intensified it literally went from a tropical storm to landfalling as a Category 5 hurricane in 12 hours, which is completely unheard of. Or not completely unheard of, but extraordinarily rare. That does not happen very often, and that was incredibly fast for it to produce that quickly. But yeah, so bomb cyclones will do something similar where they very rapidly appear. And this is caused by colliding cold and warm air masses. Like all storms, you need a temperature difference, a pressure difference, because those interactions of those masses cause the weather to happen. For warm and cold in particular, cold air masses are heavier, so they dive. Warm air masses rise. So when you meet cold and warm together, it causes the air masses to mix together because you have some trying to dive, some trying to rise, and it causes turbulence. This is more frequent over ocean waters in cooler months, because depending on where you are, sometimes the ocean is slightly warmer than the atmosphere is. And so that rising warm air mixes with that cold air that's diving. This mixture causes a low pressure system. Low pressure is particularly important for weather because just like how cold rises, cold sinks, warm air rises. Low pressure causes air to be pushed down, and high pressure pushes it up. The mixture of the two will lead to severe weather where those two boundaries meet. And very frequently, with strong low pressure systems, you're going to see heavy rain, heavy snow, strong winds. If you're on the coastal flooding, because I'll get to it a little bit more, but it basically pushes the water in as the storm comes in. Low pressure systems cause these storms because they essentially act as a vacuum. Or if you want to picture it visually, what do you call it? Like when water is going down the drain. As the low pressure pushes down, it pulls in the surrounding air, and because of that, it changes the temperature of that air and allows it to, as it gets pushed down, it'll rise in some areas. Because basically you have it pulling down here, but then it's pulling air up into the funnel. So it goes up, and as it goes up, it'll turn into clouds, which in turn turn into rain. And because high pressure air likes to travel towards low pressure air, as I said, low pressure is almost like a vacuum and it'll pull things towards it. where high pressure pushes things away. This causes wind, because as you have things rushing towards that low pressure area, that's going to make the air move. The pulling causes that wind, because now the air is literally rushing to that spot. When the air converges, where it basically mixes and where it meets, it doesn't have anywhere to go. And so it basically turns into clouds. And because of the whole cycle and how it functions, it's continuous. So you're just going to keep getting more and more clouds combining in a single area. And more clouds you have, as we know, clouds are made out of condensation, rain droplets, moisture. So thicker clouds, more rain. And the mixing of all of these conditions will produce the wind speeds. So the lower pressure area, that you're going to get higher speeds of wind because it's going to be pulling more strongly on the air around it. So very, very low pressure systems, just like bomb cyclones, where it rapidly drops in pressure, that's why you're going to get extremely strong winds, intense rain, or depending on the temperature, since this one happened in February, you got snow instead of rain, because the atmospheric conditions on the ground determine what type of precipitation is going to fall. As we know, rain, you're not in any freezing temperatures. It's not cold, so it just falls as water. Sleet is when it falls as rain, but then the ground is so cold that as soon as it lands, it freezes. And then snow is when the atmosphere is cold enough for it to freeze the snow or freeze the water in the air. And then as it collects into bigger and bigger droplets, snowflakes, it'll fall once it becomes too heavy to be supported by the air. So yeah, deep low pressures are going to create more intense winds and storms. That's why you can see like a hole in the center of a hurricane with the strongest winds being circular around that hole, because the center basically like dropped out. And all of that convergence, because the hurricane is kind of like acting like a big circulation, where the clouds, it's going up and then it's coming back down through the center. Also similar to tornadoes, but slightly different mechanics. So now, since I've been talking about hurricanes, and I know a lot of people might compare them, especially because they look so similar. Hurricanes, like visually, you can tell the difference between a hurricane and a bomb cyclone, because hurricanes are going to have that defined eye in the center. That's how climate scientists can, or meteorologists can identify whether it has turned into a hurricane or not, of how defined the eye is. If there is no eye, it's going to be classified as like a tropical storm, because there's no, as they call it, organization. But bomb cyclones, they do look similar, as I said, but because they have the like rotation to them, but they don't have a defined eye. Let me see if you can see that. Okay, you can't see that. So you can kind of see how it's circular, but it doesn't have an actual, like, it's not in a donut shape. It's in more of like a whirl kind of shape, because the mechanics that create a hurricane are slightly different than a bomb cyclone, despite the similarities in how they're produced, because all storms are all based on temperature, pressure differences, but they're still going to be created slightly differently, which I'm going to get into. Just so you kind of, I'm sure you all know what a hurricane looks like, but I just thought it kind of showed you. You can see how it. Bomb cyclones are different than hurricanes, because hurricanes have to occur over the ocean, and they will rapidly de-intensify. I don't know if that's actually a word, but I'm just going to keep using it. They will de-intensify once they hit land. That's basically why it'll hit land at a category 5, but within less than a couple hours, sometimes it'll drop down to like category 3, category 1. It's rare for hurricanes to maintain a common rate, like the rating that it made landfall with. It's exceedingly uncommon for them to like maintain that, because hurricanes have to feed off of the ocean. That's why hurricanes only happen in the summer or early fall, because the ocean temperatures need to be at least 86 degrees, because that's when it evaporates. And as I said, it feeds off of that moisture, off of that heat to fuel itself. And so as soon as it hits the land, it's cutting off its energy supply. I will preface, I know I've done a stream on this before, but just in case anyone's curious, cyclones, not a bomb cyclone, cyclones, typhoons, hurricanes, and there's another one, billabongs or something. There's one in Australia too. Those are all different names for hurricanes. They are named based on where they're located. Typhoons happen on the eastern side of the Pacific. Let me make sure I get this information right. Okay, AI, that's not helpful. Thank you. So hurricanes happen to America, basically, as well as the west side of Africa. They happen above the equator, and hurricanes will occur and affect Mexico, the eastern seaboard of the United States, and very, 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 very rarely California. We've only gotten 1 or 2 landfalling hurricanes in history. And then it'll also impact the top portion of South America, as well as Spain. And then hurricanes, even though they're super, super rare, below the equator can affect the east coast of South America. But again, those are exceedingly rare because of the way the Coriolis effect, when our Earth rotates, it mixes up the oceans and the air currents. And so those are very heavily dependent, hurricanes are heavily dependent on that rotation. That's why they spin the way they do. And they always like spin in the same direction. You're never going to see a hurricane like go the opposite way. So below the equator, it's very uncommon for them to get hurricanes, just because of how the geography is, and like there's a whole bunch of factors. But I won't get into that. Cyclones affect basically, with exception of like Japan, the coast of Russia, China, and some of the island nations on the, West Pacific Rim area. Those are going to be cyclones. So they affect Eastern Africa. They can affect India, Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand, like Middle East. What is that? Tibet, I think. It doesn't show the country, so I'm just trying to remember my geography. But yeah, cyclones are mostly in the Asian, African, Australian regions. Typhoons, mostly like China, Japan, some of the island nations. And then hurricanes, primarily the US, but parts of Africa, parts of Europe, parts of South America. Anyway, going back to how they are produced. As I said, they're different than hurricanes because hurricanes occur over the ocean. Bomb cyclones can occur over land, and they can occur in places other than just those areas that I was specifying. They can occur anywhere. Europe has had them. We have obviously had them. California, Alaska, they've had bomb cyclones before. So it is not limited by the geography of the area. It's not reliant on the ocean. Instead, it relies on what are called mesoscale weather events. Mesoscale basically means that it is like a small meteorological phenomenon, a small area, and it where was I going with that? And it relies on other weather patterns to be produced. Unlike hurricanes that can just like, you need a tropical wave, you need the moisture, and then if you have the right conditions, it'll form. Bomb cyclones need a front. As I said earlier, fronts are basically, as I said earlier, where cold and cold and warm meet, high pressure and low pressure meet. And so they need these contrasting air masses to get energy. They can also be fueled by disturbances in the jet stream. The jet stream is a high-speed highway, if you will, in the atmosphere of air, driven by the rotation of our planet, but also kind of driven by some of the weather ground differences. The jet stream is largely responsible for the weather that we see in North America and Europe, Upper Asia. If you have a strong jet stream, it basically holds the cold in the Arctic regions, in Alaska, Canada, Upper Europe, Russia area. And so it's going to be contained and you'll have more mild conditions in the lower regions. But when you have a wavy jet stream or a erratic jet stream, it allows the cold air that's normally locked up in the Arctic areas to basically spill out over the rest of the continent. And so that's what causes those cold snaps that we saw. The jet stream was really wavy and it basically allowed this lobe of cold air from the Arctic, so you imagine how cold that would be, to come down into the US where it normally doesn't go. And bomb cyclones can get their energy from these disturbances because you're basically allowing a super cold mass of air come into a normally more temperate, warm area of the US or wherever it forms. So you get that really stark mixing of these two different air masses. Another difference between the two of them, bomb cyclones need upper level winds to organize. You need winds basically driving its formation, driving the two air masses together, producing the type of movement that comes with or that creates the conditions that create the storm. Whereas with hurricanes, upper level winds, or as they call it, wind shear, prevents hurricane development because it can basically rip apart the organization within a hurricane. Wind shear, on the other hand, for bomb cyclones can help it grow because that additional wind is going to make that storm stronger. There's also differences in strength. Even though it sounds like terrifying, bomb cyclone, it is technically less powerful than a hurricane. Although I'm pretty sure bomb cyclones can last longer. Let's see. How long did that last? Oh, that's almost a little over a week. So I would hazard a guess. I don't know this officially, but I think bomb cyclones can last longer than hurricanes, especially because they don't rely on the ocean, so they can go further. But another major difference is their wind speeds. While bomb cyclones basically produce winds up to the speed of a Category 1 hurricane, obviously Category 1 is the weakest hurricane you can possibly get. So hurricanes can get much, much stronger. Bomb cyclones produce winds that are between 74 miles an hour and 95 miles an hour, whereas hurricanes can produce winds. They have to hit 74 miles an hour to qualify as a hurricane. Otherwise, it's just a tropical storm. And the highest it can get is for Category 5 hurricanes, they have to have winds of at least 157 miles an hour. And that can go higher than that. It's definitely not the peak. The record speed for a hurricane was in 2025, Hurricane Melissa, who I believe that was the one that impacted Jamaica. Yeah, that was Jamaica. Yeah, Hurricane Melissa was the one that completely devastated Jamaica. She had a record wind speed so there's wind gusts and then there's sustained winds. Sustained winds are winds that occur over like an average wind speed over a longer period of time. This can be anywhere between a minute to 10 minutes average. And her sustained winds reached up to 185 miles an hour. And then her wind gusts, those are brief, short spikes of wind. So, like, sometimes if you're watching a storm happen, you'll see the trees, it's just windy and keeps being windy, but then all of a sudden you'll hear this like huge whoosh and all the trees will like tip over and like bend over and then it'll stop. Like, that's a wind gust. So the entire storm didn't have these speeds, but there were moments where a wind gust would come through at 252 miles an hour. That is crazy. I think that is an F4 tornado speed. Let's see. Because tornadoes can reach the highest speeds of any types of storms. Let's see. F4, yep, 207 to 260 miles an hour. At this speed, even well-constructed homes would be leveled. Structures that have weak foundations would be literally blown away. So those famous imagery that we've seen from Dorothy where the house just gets picked up and like taken away, an F5 could do that, or an F4 could do that. Your cars can be thrown. Missiles can be generated where the wind literally throws things so hard that they become weapons. There are incredible images of tornadoes literally driving like a piece of wood through a tree or a straw through a tree. I've seen some incredibly crazy things that wind has done. Do not underestimate. Don't think that wind is not dangerous. It is very much a dangerous thing. Hurricanes can reach the speed of an F4 tornado. Quite devastating. The bomb cyclones, back to those. As I said, 74 to 95 miles an hour wind speed. And just to kind of give you an idea of the scale and kind of how to visualize what that might look like. So the wind speed chart, courtesy of the National Weather Service, with 1 to 3 mile an hour winds, you'll see wind motion visible in leaves, in like smoke drifting and stuff like that, but you're not really going to feel it. 4 to 7 miles an hour, you'll start to feel it on your skin. Very light things might start to blow away. 8 to 12 miles an hour, you'll see flags actually flapping. You'll see leaves like literally flying across the pavement. 13 to 18 miles an hour, you'll start to see dust get kicked up. Small branches might be moving, waving around. Where did I go? By 19 to 24 miles an hour, so basically as fast as people drive on residential streets, or should drive on residential streets, small trees will begin to sway. By 25 to 31 miles an hour, large branches are going to start moving. You can actually hear that whistling that we associate with wind. Once you get to 32 to 38 miles an hour, the entire tree is going to start moving. And people might start having difficulty walking, which is crazy. You wouldn't think that it would be that. Like 38 miles an hour seems kind of slow for wind, but it can actually impede our movement by that point already. 39 to 46 miles an hour, twigs and small sticks can start breaking off of the trees. Cars can actually be pushed by the speed of wind. By 47 to 54 miles an hour, you're going to get tree damage. You might actually have shingles being ripped off your house. 55 to 63 miles an hour, tree damage is possible. Like it could break down, like knock down your trees. And you are getting to the point where you're probably going to see structural damage on your house. Minor, but still there. Once you get to 64 to 73 miles an hour, you're going to see damage in your trees, structures, whatever you're getting to that strength. 74 to 95 miles an hour, widespread tree damage, widespread structure damage, especially with poorly built structures. So, at the very lowest level, both hurricanes and bomb cyclones will cause damage. So that's why it's very important to pay attention to weather, especially if you live in areas that are prone to these types of storms, because even a seemingly minor storm can still cause damage. Like, as I said, 32 to 38 miles an hour, people are going to have difficulty moving. So if you're reliant on walking yourself places, or you have to go to work, like, you still have to take even minor storms into consideration, because it can still affect how you walk, how you drive. It can still cause trees to fall into the road, all kinds of stuff. And that's not even factoring in the precipitation. That's only the wind. Once you get to the higher speeds, obviously the damage becomes far more significant. With the Category 1 size hurricane, which again is about where the bomb cyclone strength is, you're going to start seeing minor damage to your property. And yeah, it can still cause broken tree branches. It can cause downed power lines. It can cause damage to your house, ripping off shingles off your roof. Obviously, if it's throwing objects, those things can do damage as well. So it's important to know what's coming for you, so you can adequately prepare. There's a lot of risks and hazards that come with these types of storms. Both, I actually didn't know this. I found this out when I was looking it up. Hurricanes can actually cause snow. I always thought that they couldn't, just because of like, oh, they're warm, tropical. But like, if they hit mountains, or if they hit at certain times of the year, they can actually cause snow. How you prepare for the storm will depend on whether it's a warm weather storm or cold weather storm, but a lot of the same things still stand. So first, going over risks, then we'll go over like preparedness. The main risks that come with any storm, really, but bomb cyclones, hurricanes in particular, the risk of heavy flooding. Not only this is caused by a bunch of things, actually. One, you're getting heavy rain. So if your gutters are blocked, you could get flooding on the streets. If your house is a low-lying area, you're going to get flooding because it's a pooling location. If you're along rivers, you can have flooding because the river cannot hold all of the rain that's coming in. And the problem with river swelling and stream overflow is, and lakes as well, sometimes it can even happen where the storm isn't affecting you. Like, let's say a storm happens here, and then there's streams, rivers, going out to the ocean. Even people that are away from the storm, that are downstream, can still get hit with flooding, because all that rain has to go somewhere, and it's going to go straight to the ocean. So it does benefit you to pay attention to storms that are nearby as well, especially if you live near waterways. If you live near rivers, near streams, near dams, near anything really that hold water, particularly if they're connected to other bodies of water. Also, you want to know about these things because you might have to drive over bridges to go to work. You might have to drive along areas that follow rivers. It's very common to see roadways that like perfectly follow the line of the river. And so even if there's no like substantial flooding affecting your property, it can still affect your drive. It can affect the roads. It can affect the supermarket you go to all the time. So you need to be aware of the risks of flooding. There's fantastic flood maps out there made by various reputable organizations that can show you whether your area is at risk for flooding or not. They have graphs to show like historic flooding, what has been affected before, how much flooding, and stuff like that. Or even just like compare elevation to the potential, the risk of flooding. So there's great tools out there that you can check to see your own community's resilience. And I definitely suggest it, even if you don't live near one of those high risk areas. Like you're literally on top of a mountain or something, it's still a very useful tool to have because you can see the risks of the surrounding area, maybe other loved ones, or routes that you take very frequently, your work, all that stuff. So yeah, heavy rain, downstream flooding. You can also get storm surges when with low pressure systems, they push down on the ground, which is also why some people have like sinus issues, pressure issues, headaches when there's a low pressure system nearby, a storm coming in, because it's literally pushing down on the fluids in our bodies. If that happens over the ocean, lake, sometimes big wide rivers, it can cause storm surges, which is where a lump of water is pushed up in front of the storm and gets pushed inland during that storm's progression. This is particularly damaging during hurricanes, but it can also happen with bomb cyclones, especially if they happen on the coast and move inland. Storm surges are, I don't know if I want to say more dangerous, because I think it's not good to classify one type of flooding over the other as more dangerous. But I think storm surges are at least are going to be more widespread, because if you're going to be on the beach, elevation really matters. It can sweep inland very far. I'm sure for anyone alive during that time period, old enough to remember, we can visualize what happened in Hurricane Katrina. Storm surges overtopped some of their walls, broke others. And it basically, and Louisiana is in a bowl, so all that water just like sat there. So storm surges can be very devastating. They're basically like storm-induced mini tsunamis. And they can happen very quickly. It's very deceptive, where you can suddenly go from no water to like 3 inches of water in your living room in a matter of hours. And it can also happen before the actual storm hits. Like you can actually get the flooding before the storm comes in. This is also why it's very dangerous to swim before storms come in. Even if there's no storm surge, the storm itself affects the currents, and it can cause riptides where the water like pulls out to sea. As I said, low pressure pulls things in. It can pull the tide in, and if you're stuck in a rip current, it can literally wash you out to sea and you can drown. I've heard of, I think there was a storm in January or December in California, and a couple people drowned because they got stuck in a riptide. So if you know a storm is coming, don't use that as your time to swim in the ocean. Um, Stick to the pool, or don't go swimming at all, because the storms, even out to sea, can still affect what's happening. Even if it doesn't even make landfall, like the storm just being out to sea can majorly affect the tides, the waves, all that stuff. So be very careful if you consider going to the beach before a storm. Flooding can also happen with blocked sewage systems. Leaves can pile up in front of the drainage pipes. Things can like block, and then also just having the inundation of water, sometimes they get overloaded and they can't drain fast enough, so it just floods on the street. So that's also quite problematic, and can affect like driving, and it can sometimes cause backflow where it comes up through your toilet, through your sink. So not fun. This inundation of rain can also cause land subsidence. You can get landslides, which are when the land collapses. You can get mudslides, which is when you get topsoil mixed with water running downhill. And so you get this slurry of mud running through houses, especially like landslides, mudslides, very common on hills, mountainy locations. If you're by any sort of like incline, keep your eye out for that, because depending on the type of land that you live on, you could be at risk when there's flooding type rain, because it can basically seep in and break the soil apart and make it fall. If you're along coastlines, you can see cliff collapses, you can see sinkholes, which are basically when the ground drops into a space beneath the ground. Very, very common in Florida for the sinkholes. Cliff collapses are very common anywhere where there's ocean cliffs, especially with the really strong waves pounding on the cliffs, the rain coming in. It can, every year when we have storms in California, you'll see this cliff collapse, this iconic place collapse. Like it, there was a famous house in San Francisco called the Cliff House. And in 1907, I think, after a storm, it literally like fell off the cliff into the ocean. So it's no longer there. But that's an example of what storms can do. They can really mess with the land as much as the causing flooding damage. So that also goes with like, know where you live, know what your risks are, because these aren't things that you want to find out about during the storm. You definitely want to know about this before any of this happens, so you can adequately prepare or evacuate if necessary. If you live in regions affected by wildfires recently, I'd say within the last 5 years, before vegetation has been able to grow back, that also puts you at a higher risk of landslides and mudslides, because there isn't anything holding the soil together. Plant life helps to keep that ground held together with their roots. So if you've been in places that have been affected by fire, such as Altadena was recently affected, Camp Fire, even though that's been a while. If you've been through those things, be wary, because you're at higher risk for these types of land subsidences, landslide, mudslide, stuff like that. Another risk, fallen trees. If you have a large tree near your house, definitely seek out a tree expert before the storm so he can verify and make sure that the tree's healthy, that its limbs aren't at risk of collapsing. He might be able to do a trimming. You can also, you also might want to get the If it's near power lines, get the electric company, whatever they're called, to come and like trim the branches so they're not near the power lines. It's like, I would say that fallen trees are like half the reason why power gets knocked out during storms, besides the wind itself. If a tree falls, it can damage your house, break through your roof, break your windows, smash your car. When I was like, I don't know, 7 or something, I think it was like 2007. So I wasn't 7, but anyway, we went to this beach town near Pebble Beach in California. And it was during a bad storm. And we actually got to see a car that had gotten crushed by a tree. So that was very memorable. Yes, how can I help you?
Can you press start?
Can I do this a little bit later?
Mm-hmm.
Give me like 5 to 10 minutes, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'll meet you downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
All right, go downstairs. So yeah, fallen trees are a risk. So you want to make sure that you get them checked out if you have, especially if you have large trees, and trimmed, pruned, whatever you need to do, to ensure that it's safe during the storm. Additionally, kind of mentioned this during flooding, land subsidence. You might also, you should factor in road disruptions, flooding, landslides, mudslides, collapsing, sinkholes, all can affect the roadway. Even without that stuff, the rain itself can like strip the asphalt off the road and cause potholes. It can put debris into the roadway. In really bad cases, mudslides, rock slides, stuff like that, and flooding can completely cut off communities. This happened during Hurricane Helene, where some communities were not able to have access to anything, emergency services, food, you name it, for sometimes weeks, because the only road in and out of that one area had been destroyed by some method, whether it fell off the cliff or it was covered or it was flooded. So you want to factor that in. And these types of things should affect how you prepare. You also want to check your home as well. If you have an older home, one that you know isn't really great during storms, if you have like poorly insulated houses, because as I said, this can also bring snow and cold just as much as it brings rain. Also power outages can also be caused by ice buildup, because it can literally like snap the power lines, because ice is very heavy. But you want to make sure that your house is also safe during these storms. Obviously, flooding is kind of hard to prepare for. You could put it on stilts if you're in an area that's very prone to flooding, but for the most part, there's not a ton you can do for flooding, at least. But for wind damage, like, make sure your roof is up to date. Make sure it doesn't have, like, you don't have insulation problems. I know that one's kind of a more costly thing to think about. But if you're able to, fixing up your home, finding ways to improve its stability would be important, especially if you live in areas where storms like these are more common. Granted, as I said, these storms can kind of happen anywhere, but they are more common in other areas, certain areas than others. So, as I said, emergency preparedness will heavily depend on which type of storm it's going to be, whether it's warm weather or cold weather. in my opinion, I think the cold weather ones are worse, but that's just me. Um, there's a lot of things that you'll need to have on you in the case of an emergency. Um, and there's two types of preparation that you should be doing. The first type of preparation is preparation to be in home, to shelter in place, but then you should also have a plan and a set of supplies for an evacuation. Especially with flooding, evacuation is going to be very necessary. But you want to have both, because sometimes you might be stuck in your house for a week, and sometimes you might have to like get up and leave right now. So you need to have preparations for both types of situations. So one of the first things that you will want to have for shelter in place, which, by the way, don't do this the day before the storm. Do this gradually over time, so you aren't competing with everyone else and the price gouging that the stores are going to do. This should be something that you do over a long term. Like, I've been collecting canned foods for probably a year and a half now, and then I also buy overstock of like stuff that we would need, toilet paper and whatnot, just in case there's an emergency. But generally, you want to have at least 3 days of food, even though I err on the side of caution and would really advise 7 days, especially if you live in a rural community. If you live in a place where you have like only 1 or 2 roads in or out, I would suggest like 7 days or more of food, non-perishable food. Sure, take it. Per day, and per person per day. And when I say non-perishable foods, canned goods, crackers, rice, things that are easy to put together, and easy to use, easy to access, don't really involve cooking. There are ways that you can cook without needing electricity, but you do have to make sure that you buy those things, because it does not help you to have a bag of rice if you don't have a cooking stove, like a little cooking camper thing. There are a lot of different things for cooking. Camping supplies are particularly beneficial. But again, like, you need perishable foods that are wrapped up, sealed, stuff like that. Fruit does not count as a non-perishable. Frozen does not count as a non-perishable, because if your power goes out and your fridge goes out, your freezer goes out, that's not gonna be good. So you need to have like canned goods, crackers, dry foods, dry goods. And don't expect to be baking either. Easy stuff. Canned soups are amazing. Get canned fruits as well, because the added nutrients. Canned vegetables. There's a lot of options. I would suggest looking it up if you have a limited palate or something like that. But yeah, several days of food. Factor in the number of family members you have. Get some for your pets too. Don't forget about the pets. Have extra food for your cat, dog, whatever animal you have. And yeah, as I said, factor at least 3 days. If you're in a more rural community, I'd go 7 to 10. I've heard of people being stuck in their homes for like 14 days to a month because of where they lived. But again, judge where you live. You also want to have 1 gallon per person per day just for drinking. You also want to have extra water to help you flush toilets, wash your hands, use for cooking, stuff like that. But you want to have a lot of water on stock for for drinking. I would advise getting both big jugs and small bottles because one, it limits the risk of like there can be contamination, there can be issues with that, and then also portability. If you have to flee, you don't want to carry a 3-gallon jug. You probably only want to have the water bottles. But yeah, have water per person for several days. And also, again, don't forget to include pets. Another really, really important thing is having a NOAA weather radio, particularly one that has an alert to it, because if your power goes out and your phone, the cellular towers go down, it can still alert you for evacuation necessity and any other situations that are going on. I would suggest hand crank, but they also have battery powered ones. Hand crank I think is best because even if like the batteries run out, you can still use it, make it work. So food, water, weather radio, flashlights. I like to have a flashlight in every room in my house. That way, if there's emergency, it doesn't matter where I am, I'm not fumbling in the dark, I can find it. I have, like I said, one by my bed, one in the kitchen, one in the bathroom, one everywhere. I also have these like, is it here? My kid keeps playing with it. I have these like round bulb lights that are chargeable, and you just like tap the top to turn it on and off. I like those too because you can use them as like lamps in your house if the power goes out. And then the flashlight's good for carrying it around, going outside, stuff like that. First aid kit. Have a first aid kit with minor things that would be necessary, particularly injuries that would be common in a storm situation, things that can help with cuts and gashes, things that can help with like minor situations, pain relief, stuff like that. Also, make sure this one is also geared towards you specifically. If there are special medications that you need, make sure to have extras on hand. If you have family members that are reliant on certain things, make sure you have those on hand, have extras, because those are going to be very hard to come by if there is a disaster. And people who are like diabetic, people who have certain conditions and need like very particular medications or like treatments and stuff like that are more prone to getting hurt, passing away because they don't have access to those things that they need. So get a good first aid kit. And again, cater it to your specific needs. Have those medications you need. I also like to have at home, I have a thermometer, I have a blood pressure cuff, a stethoscope, and I also have like a lot of different bandages, different like antiseptics and stuff like that. You'll want different types of antiseptics because there's a difference between neosporin and iodine and not hydrochloric acid, hydrogen peroxide. Like you'll want alcohol, not the drinking kind. You'll want a variety of supplies that can help with medical situations. And you don't have to have like a surgical kit. Like you don't have to worry about that, but have enough stuff to stave off injuries before you're able to get the actual help that you need. So also with these devices, flashlights, if you have the other tools that I mentioned, you'll want to get extra batteries, have those on hand, and make sure that the batteries are not expired. One nifty tool that I highly suggest for anybody is a battery checker. I have this device that will tell me if the battery is on or if it's dead or not. And it doesn't need any electricity or anything. You just like put it in and it like the thing goes up to tell you if it's like dead or not. So yeah, have extra batteries. Make sure you have the right size of batteries. Make sure you know what size of batteries those things need. There's nothing worse than thinking, oh, it's a AAA, and then you realize it's a D battery, and you're like, oh, great, cool, what a time to find out. You also should have a whistle, because this can be life-saving if you're stuck. Like, let's say your house flooded, you have to go on your roof, or let's say you get stuck under rubble because your wall collapses or something. Having a whistle can help rescuers find you. It can help you signal that you need help. A lot of purposes for it, but have a whistle. And honestly, like, I would even suggest having a whistle for each member of the family. If the storm is bad enough, like, hold on to it that way, just in case something happens. But yeah, whistles, dusk masks. Having masks are really important, especially if there is like contaminated air from whatever's happening, floodwaters, dust in the air. In flooding situations, that water is going to carry sewage. It's going to carry manure from nearby fields. It's going to carry God knows what pesticides and chemicals and whatnot. So have something to cover your mouth and protect yourself. There's literally a disease called valley fever, something like that, which is literally caused by exposure to flooding. I think it's valley fever. Let me see. Yes. Yeah, it's a fungal infection. Causes fever, cough, tiredness. It's common in soils, and so anything that disturbs the soils can put it into your body if you breathe it in. So have some sort of breathing apparatus that protects your face, protects your lungs, and have those again for all members of the family. You'll also want to have plastic sheeting, scissors, duct tape, just to repair if your window breaks, if your wall gets a hole in it, if your roof gets a hole in it. Those will be indispensable to prevent more damage from coming to your house, because you can block the rain from coming in, wind, all that stuff. So have stuff for brief repairs if you do sustain damage. So plastic sheets, scissors, duct tape, good scissors, not the cheap Dollar Tree ones. You'll also want to have wet towelettes, like the little, you use them, the ones that you get at the doctor's, or sometimes like the hand towels. Garbage bags, plastic ties for personal sanitation. We all know what that means. Sometimes your sewage system isn't going to work, so you're going to need to find alternate methods to relieve yourself and put them somewhere other than like in a toilet that doesn't work. So make sure you have things to dispose of the things that come out of us, especially if you don't even have access to going outside because it's stormy. So have stuff like that. Also, females, you know what I'm going to say, have those supplies as well. You'll also want to have a wrench or pliers, specifically to turn off utilities. Fires can be a big problem in storms, because if the power goes off and you have like gas lines break or something like that, it can cause gas leaks. It can cause fires if it like ignites. There's a lot of things that can happen. So you'll want to have a wrench or pliers to turn off your utilities, to protect yourself and your home. A manual can opener. I cannot emphasize enough. Manual. I have seen so many stories of people who had an electric can opener and then the power went out and they could not use their can opener, and they had loads of food, but they could not get in them. I've had that happen to me in college, but luckily I was just able to go to the store for it. But have a manual can opener for those canned foods. And frankly, I would get an extra just in case it breaks, because I've also had that happen. Also, have local maps of your area. Know where you live, know where your neighbors are, know where the hospitals are, know where police are. Like, you need to know your area and have maps of those areas, because again, cell phone signal goes out, internet goes out. You're not going to have access to Google Maps. You're not going to be able to, you might not be able to recognize the town that you grew up in because everything's destroyed. Worst case scenario, obviously. But have local maps. It can help you navigate to safer locations. If you get a really good one, it can tell you like the gradation and like how high it is. So you can like, oh, I need to get to higher ground. Like, let's go here. So have local maps. And then have a charger for your cell phone. And I don't know if this really applies. I guess if you got like a disposable cell phone, but it says cell phone with chargers and a backup battery. I guess with our modern phones, you probably won't be able to have an extra backup battery, but have chargers for your phone so you can still use it once things are back to normal. That one, I guess, would be more for getting out of Dodge. So other things that you want to consider: having soap, hand sanitizer, disinfecting wipes. As I mentioned earlier, prescription medications that are important to you or necessary for you, have those on demand. Like, have that supply, extras, prior to the storm. Have medications like pain relievers, anti-diarrheal medications, very important if there's water issues, antacids, laxative, whatever, the things that you might need to relieve ailments, have those on hand. If you have prescription eyeglasses or contact lenses, have extra supplies of those, or backups. If you have babies, have their formula, have extra bottles, have diapers, have wipes, diaper rash, creams, whatever you might need for the baby, have those as well. As I said, pet food, extra stuff for your animal. Cash and traveler's checks. This is something that's really important, because if the power lines are knocked down, we don't think this anymore because we all use our cards, but a lot of these stores might not have access to the machines and stuff that they use to take money. So cash and checks will be vital for you in situations where you might have to go to the store while all of this damage is still ongoing. You should have important family documents, insurance policies, identification, bank records, in either saved electronically or put in a waterproof container. Like I have, mine is in a waterproof sleeve, and then I put the waterproof sleeve inside a fireproof bag. So that way, no matter what happens, I still have like birth certificates and all the other stuff that we need to be humans. If you are if there is a risk of it being a cold storm, have like a sleeping bag or a tent, and a really warm blanket, because if the power goes out, then you'll still be able to be warm in your bed. Also, the sleeping bags are versatile because you can take it with you if you have to leave the house. If you have to evacuate, you should be bringing these things. You should be bringing the medication, the cash, the medications, the first aid kit. You don't have to bring all the canned foods, but bring enough to get you to the next place that you're going to. But bring that sleeping bag, bring a complete change of clothes, that is appropriate for the weather that you're having. So don't just go out in shorts and a t-shirt if it's cold, or if it's rainy, like don't forget to bring a jacket. But basically have spare clothes on you just in case. Sturdy shoes. We don't want to be walking around in Crocs if there's like debris on the ground and flooding and whatever. So have like boots or like outdoor hiking shoes and stuff like that. In the house, have a fire extinguisher. I mean, to be honest, you should have that one anyways. Also have matches that are in a waterproof container. If they get wet, they won't work. So you want to make sure that if you you have the matches and that you have them in a container that will not allow them to be destroyed. You'll also want to have candles, preferably just for cooking. You can use it, like you can use 4 candles to heat up a bowl, a thing of water and like cook something in it. But I would not suggest using it as lights because if they get knocked over, it can burn your house down. So I would highly suggest just rechargeable lights and flashlights, but you can still use the candles in a pinch to heat up water for food or other purposes. As I said, personal hygiene supplies. Ladies, you know what I'm talking about. Have other eating supplies too, because you're not going to have access to your dishwasher. So having like paper cups, plates, paper towels, plastic utensils, stuff like that, very useful as well. Paper and pencils. I cannot reiterate that enough because you never know what the situation might be. You might need to leave notes for rescuers, for family members. You might even need to just like have a sign that says like, help me, please. So in your bug out bag, have a paper and have a pad of paper and pencils. Like you never even know, you might lose your voice. You might have some like injury and you can't talk. So you have to like write it out, write a message. Have a paper and pencil. And then if you have children, bring stuff for them, puzzles, books, games, whatever, things that will occupy them. That way they are not as stressed out. Preferably things that don't take a ton of pieces, but it definitely depends on the age group of your child. But get things that are low tech. Don't expect to just bring an iPad. Promise that's not going to work the whole time. So have things for your child as well as your pets. If you have a dog or whatever, chew toy, something. And when you're making these kits, particularly the one that you're going to be taking out with you, that's going to be the one with your spare clothes, your documents, your money, a small amount of food, prescription, then the ultra necessities, the I cannot leave the house without this type of stuff, and I cannot live without this stuff. Put it into a sturdy bag. Keep anything, like make sure you keep like recycling things out as they expire. Medications expire, things lose their potency. Make sure you keep checking these bags. It shouldn't be a set it and forget it. 10 years from now, you have that big storm and you're like, oh, I can't actually eat any of this. So make sure you're rotating your supply in and out. Like I treat mine like the pantry where I use it as I want, but then as soon as I use it, I replace it with more. And also update it with your family's needs. Like if your baby grows up, you no longer need those diapers and stuff, but maintain that kit, maintain your pantry, have these supplies on hand, know where you are putting them. Don't have it so when the storm is coming in and you have to evacuate, you have to search your entire house because you don't remember where you put that backpack. Or I also like the tubs, like the plastic has the things that you snap shut. Those can also be good because they can be kind of waterproof. But I would suggest every family member have their own. That way they have their own clothes, they have their own toys, needs, whatever with them, just in case you get separated. It does nobody good if one person has all the stuff and then they get separated from the whole group and then the rest of them are just stuck. So have everyone have one. And make sure that it's in a spot that can be easily grabbed. If you have to leave in 15 seconds, or I guess that's kind of short, but like if you have to leave in like a minute, do you know where it is? Can you just literally grab it, put your shoes on, and go? That is what you need to think of, because these kits are not just for, oh, there's an incoming storm, like I need to worry about this, think about this. It could be for a house fire, it could be for an earthquake, it could be for a lot of different things. So to keep that in mind, put it close to the door, downstairs, have it readily available, and make sure that you work with your family so they also know what's in there, where to grab it, just in case you don't happen to be there. And preferably put it where your shoes are, because then you can just grab the thing, put your shoes on, and leave. Also, have a kit in your car too. You, just in case, you never know, you could get stranded somewhere. It's good for other purposes too, even if you never experience a disaster. Let's say you get stranded on the side of the freeway because your car shuts down or does whatever. You can still have that on hand. You can have your documents. You can have a spare set of clothes. You can have food and all the other necessities to keep yourself safe and alive. So I know I threw a lot at you, but there are, as I said, a lot of great websites that have this information. NOAA, NOAA, is a great resource. I get my information for making emergency kits from ready.gov/kit. They focus specifically on getting out of situations safely, and they have all of that information available for you, and have it broken down into different types of things to consider, types of people, and then also like summer ready versus winter, stuff like that, because obviously you're going to need different things if this is a summer hurricane versus a winter blizzard. So you'll also want to make sure you factor in what type of disaster it is. But again, there are still the same basic things that you always need to have. So with that, I hope this information was useful for people. I know this was longer than typical, but because of what was happening on the East Coast, I just wanted to make sure that people had a better idea of how to prepare. A lot of people were affected by this and were kind of unprepared for what happened. There was a 1,000-car pileup on the freeway just because people were not expecting the ice buildup that was there. So I just, and also like the fact that so many people didn't even think that the storm, like they thought it was a conspiracy theory. I just really wanted to address what a bomb cyclone is and how to properly prepare for storms like this, just so people can stay safe. These things can happen at any time. Unlike hurricanes, there isn't a specific season. There are more common time periods like in winter, spring.